You are watching the press preview, a first look at what's on the front pages as they arrive. It's time to see what's making the headlines with The Guardian's deputy political editor, Jessica Elgot, and the PR consultant, Alex Deane. They'll be with us from now until just before midnight. So let's see what's on some of those front pages for you now. With the Prince and Princess of Wales in Boston, the Metro highlights the release of a trailer for Harry and Meghan's Netflix documentary with a headline, "Now It's Our Turn." The Express asks, Harry, do you really hate your family so much? While the Star opts for full-blown sarcasm, declaring publicity-shy couple share most intimate secrets with 8 billion people. As The Sun puts it, kiss means war. The Eye warns that the Royal Mail could struggle to cope with demand over Christmas. While The Guardian claims an exclusive with news that health union chiefs are meeting to plan a joint strike across the festive period. Strikes lead the Times too, with an appeal from ministers to the rail unions to call a festive truce in their industrial action. The Telegraph reports that Downing Street is backtracking on a new free speech law which would stop universities cancelling appearances by controversial speakers. The National from Scotland reports on the resignation of Ian Blackford as the SNP's leader in Westminster. The Mail carries extracts from the former Health Secretary Matt Hancock's new book, in which he reveals a plan to release thousands of prisoners that was under discussion at the height of the pandemic. And the Financial Times has a story concerning the troubled investment bank, Blackstone. And a reminder that by scanning the QR code you'll see on screen during the programme, you can check out the front pages of tomorrow's newspapers while you watch us. And we are joined tonight by Jessica Elgot and Alex Deane. Welcome to both of you. Let us start with the Metro and pictured on the front page, Harry and Meghan with the headline, "Now It's Our Turn." Jessica, take us into this.
So this is a new Netflix documentary purporting to show Harry and Meghan's side of the story. I think it's something that Meghan alluded to in another interview that she did, where she said that we kind of wanted to tell the couple story, their love story that hadn't been hadn't really been out there before. And some of the language used to describe it is quite interesting, where it's nobody sees what goes on behind closed doors is one of the things that Harry said, and you can see why some of the papers have adopted a bit of a sarcastic tone to that, because I think obviously one of the reasons that the couple gave was for leaving was having their private life so much in the spotlight, having people kind of speculate what was going on behind closed doors too much, or being too much subject to press intrusion, and some of that probably totally valid, but I think it's obviously awkward timing with the Prince and Princess of Wales in the US.
Do you think it's deliberate? Do you think it's deliberate timing? Do you think it's deliberate timing or not?
Yeah, I think it is. I mean, I think that marketing people tend to know what they're doing. I think probably what is something that you can't really time is that it comes after yesterday's row about an incident at the palace where someone was quizzed very heavily on their background and what country they came from, and obviously that sits quite awkwardly with the way that Meghan describes being treated in sort of racially insensitive ways by the palace herself. So that I don't think you could really plot around, but yes, of course it feels likely that there is some element of timing around it with this visit to the US, yeah.
And Alex, another quote from the trail for this documentary from Meghan herself, saying, "When the stakes are this high, doesn't it make sense to hear our story from us?" Is that a valid point, that they get to tell their own story in their own words?
Well, I think part of it's absolutely valid. The notion that there's a love story here between these two people, I think that's a completely valid point. But I think Jessica puts her finger on the hypocrisy that many of us will feel seeing these headlines. As a monarchist, find it rather difficult because I want to be on the side of these people. But you can't help but feel like we're being taken for a ride now, as the people who said that they wanted to protect their privacy launch their Netflix show and go after another photo opportunity, one after another. Now, I actually think we may disagree slightly about the timing. I agree with Jessica that they can't have possibly have timed it with regard to the incident at the Buckingham Palace. But I would like to be charitable and think that it was not deliberate with regard to the royal visit to the United States. And that may sound naive, but I would really like to think and hope that no man would do this to his brother, and that Harry and William, who are, all things being equal, are still brothers and are still pretty close, as we've seen in recent times for obvious reasons after the death of Her Majesty the Queen. I just cannot believe that Harry would countenance sticking it to his brother in such a deliberate way. So, naive as it may sound, I'm going to hope and say that my view is that it's a coincidence.
And Jessica, do you think that the visit by the Prince and Princess of Wales in America, in Boston at the moment, do you think that has been overshadowed by the trail that's been put out and also by the incident in Buckingham Palace?
I think, obviously these kinds of stories are by and large more interesting than the Prince and maybe I sound cynical, more interesting than the Prince and Princess of Wales doing kind of routine visits to places in the United States. I mean, your viewers might find what they're doing over there very, very interesting, but I think that probably there are things of greater interest to the British public, so it's not very difficult to overshadow what they're doing. If that's overly cynical, but I think probably it's not the best start for them, and going to the US is probably always going to be slightly more difficult than it was for William and Kate, because I think there was a real feeling over there of solidarity with Meghan and the way that she's been treated, and you certainly saw that. I think there was some booing when the pictures of them were shown at a sports game. So I think more so than ever, there's a kind of a delicacy around these international trips that royals will take, probably from now on.
And Alex, what do you think the public feeling is here towards Harry and Meghan? We look at the Star, and it's a very sarcastic headline. They're saying publicity-shy couple share most intimate secrets with 8 billion people.
Yeah, God bless the Star. I rather like this. That summed up my view. That they've been so faux coy with the idea they want to protect their privacy whilst doing things like this constantly. I mean, I thought that the Star's front page was spot on, actually. I think that a lot of people in this country started with enormous goodwill towards Harry and Meghan. And as they've seen them stick it towards Harry's own family, not least making it very hard, I think, for the Queen in her last months, I think that sympathy has waned quite considerably. So I think the sarcasm that the Star shows is probably pretty demonstrative of public opinion here in the UK.
But Jessica, do you think that the public will be interested to hear their story in their own words?
I'm pretty sure that this Netflix documentary is going to get an enormous viewership in the UK. I mean, I think we say that people are going to shun it because they feel it's distasteful. I just don't think that's human. I just don't think that's human nature or human behaviour. I mean, I think people are going to be fascinated in the same way as they saw the Oprah Winfrey documentary. I struggle to see what more there is to say, even if I found some of the stuff that Meghan said in that Oprah Winfrey interview quite shocking and sort of potentially justifiable to speak out about. I do struggle with what new information we can possibly have about this couple now, but I think regardless of that, there's certainly going to be extraordinary interest, I would imagine.
Yes, we shall see. We shall see. Let's move on to another story now on the front of The Guardian, and this is the possibility of coordinated strikes to impose maximum impact. Alex.
It's a real shame, I think. I know that people who are in charge of unions naturally seek to coordinate their activities at a time that will have maximum impact. But I mean, any strike in the NHS is going to trigger huge upset, especially with the backlog post-COVID that we've got for various operations and appointments. But the notion that people would scheme to seek to strike over Christmas seems to me particularly ill-judged. The National Health Service is held up in our country as a great institution for which everyone has respect, and they really do run the risk, I think, of eroding that with things like this. I think that, of course, in the cost of living crisis, people expect to see pay rises pretty much across the board. But many people will look at the offer that was made to nursing staff and others and think, well, even if you're not going to settle for that, at least you should keep negotiating and not withdraw your labour and not have a strike during Christmas. And I think it would be really bad to have, and we've seen all these other strikes that are coming out, rail and post and others. I think it would be really bad to see our healthcare staff walk out during Christmas. And I think it would harm their position in the public quite considerably.
We read that the NHS will grind to a halt on the 20th of December. That's the date that's being considered. Coordinated Christmas strike in England and Wales by nurses, ambulance workers and hospital staff. And these discussions are continuing, and the growing consensus is that the 20th of December will be the date for, as we say, maximum impact, Jessica.
Yeah, and you can, and you know, like Alex says, it's not unheard of for unions to coordinate strike action in order to have the impact, because you know the point of a strike is to have impact. And you know the point of withdrawing your labour is to make the point that you don't feel negotiations are getting anywhere. And you know, for nurses, this is the first strike in I think more than a century, and at the moment, the pay offer isn't anywhere near, you know, what they would deem to be acceptable. And the government's been using quite hardline rhetoric about, you know, it being completely unaffordable to give them, you know, more, you know, a bigger rise. When, you know, frankly, when we've just seen pensioners in the triple lock get a 10% rise and you know, in their pension, and that's probably rightly so. But we're not seeing, you know, working people necessarily get anything like that kind of rise. And you know, deals have been done actually with nursing staff, still below inflation pay rises, but bigger pay rises in Scotland and in Wales. So there's clearly a union that's open to some compromise. And you know, the feeling I get when I'm, you know, speaking to people there is that, you know, nurses don't really want to strike, and I think they understand, you know, what it, you know, that they might be the target of some public anger if they do. So I think there is still some hope of being able to avert it. But you know, there is obviously a move into contingency planning now, and how you still provide a service that doesn't actually put people at risk in the way that you might have a kind of Christmas Day level of staffing, where you can't, you know, people's operations might get cancelled, routine appointments might get cancelled, but you still, you know, have that life-saving care available.
Yes, the number 10 is urging the unions to consider the impact on patients and have said that public sector pay awards must be affordable for the taxpayer. Just before the break, let's take a look at the Telegraph. And this is a piece about the government rowing back on university free speech law that they were putting forth, now seemingly watering it down, Alex.
Yeah, that's right. Instead of the previous proposals, which were quite stringent on free speech on campus, there's now a complaints procedure that's been put forward by government. On the one hand, one hears the people who've been so-called cancelled under recent events and understands why they are frustrated by what the government is now saying. There are several high-profile people who've been denied their ability to speak at universities and so forth, who are very frustrated that there's not more being done. And that's the Telegraph uses some very powerful examples, emotive examples of people who've been cancelled on various high-profile issues. On the other hand, you've got to wonder, if you try to force this on universities, isn't the natural result that they stop inviting people in the first place. And I think that whilst I appreciate some of this has been clamping down on individual societies who invited people that the broader authorities in the university didn't want to invite in the first place, in the end, it seems that there's going to be a chilling effect on campus per se because of the woke agenda, whatever government does. I like the idea that government should try to protect free speech on campus and elsewhere. But in the end, you cannot tell people to love free speech and then see them do so. It's not something that you can order by fiat or by law. It has to be something that you encourage and seek to inculcate in a culture. I don't think you can demand it and then see it flourish.
Thank you both. We have run out of time before the break. We'll see you after said break. But coming up, fresh from the jungle, Matt Hancock has a new book on the way. We'll be discussing that when we come back and its startling revelations. Welcome back. You're watching the press preview. Still with me, Jessica Elgot and Alex Deane. Let us have a look at the National. And Ian Blackford pictured on the front page, a decision to resign as SNP group leader, we read. Tell us a bit more about the background to this, Jessica.
Yeah, so Ian Blackford, saying that this is, it's time for fresh leadership. And he would have been, it would have been standing again at the AGM of the Westminster Group next week. But this comes after, essentially repeated attempts by his own MPs to oust him in favour of a new generation of SNP MPs, and he's been a particular target for plotting within the ranks. And it is something that I think reflects probably on Nicola Sturgeon's authority as well, because some of her closest aides were kind of trying to keep him in post as recently as last week. We're reporting tonight, amongst others, that Stephen Flynn, who's the Aberdeen South MP, has essentially told Blackford that he's got the necessary support amongst colleagues in Westminster to oust him if he did stand. So it seems like that's been the driving point and the thing that tipped him over the edge today to announce that he wouldn't stand again.
So slightly pushed is what you're saying. Let's we're running out of time, but I just want to get to this last story, Alex. On the front page of the Daily Mail, Matt Hancock's Out of the Jungle, surprise, surprise, has a book out, and there are some startling revelations.
That's right, not least the suggestion that there was a plan during the worst times in coronavirus to effectively release a number of people who should be in prison. It sounds more like the sort of thing that happens in banana republics where, the state can't afford to keep people locked up anymore, so they have to let them out. And it does make you reflect on and look back on quite how far we went as a country to contemplate the notion that criminals in quite some serious criminality would be effectively, if not pardoned, and have an amnesty because the state couldn't manage to keep you in prison any longer. I get that having people in close proximity to one another and having their liberty curtailed posed unique challenges during coronavirus. But surely we as a civilized country had the wherewithal both to maintain our coronavirus procedures and keep dangerous criminals off the street. So it's quite alarming to see that this was proposed, and I'm very glad it didn't happen.
Jessica, should he be allowed to reveal details such as this?
Well, I mean, I think that everybody else is going to be doing those kinds of things, aren't they? I mean, I think that I think to a certain extent, this is what political biographies always do. And don't forget, we've got what will be a fairly intensive public inquiry coming down the track that Matt Hancock will have to spend an awful lot of time giving evidence to. And you might argue that the right forum for this kind of thing to come out and be analysed is in a public inquiry where the evidence for either can be weighed up, but it's not surprising he's making money out of it.
Jessica and Alex, see you in the next hour. Thank you so much for the moment.